This is Lisa from MobileTechReview, and this is the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga, 4th generation for 2019. And just like with the X1 Carbon 7th generation we recently reviewed, we have reviewed every generation of the Yoga. And what's new here? Well, one of the big changes is instead of the black painted carbon fiber finish that goes with the whole ThinkPad line and look, they've gone with aluminum instead for the chassis, and I actually like it, this iron gray look here. And I'm a fan of the matte black ThinkPad, so it looks pretty cool. They have also made it smaller, so the footprint and in fact the casing almost is identical to the X1 Carbon, which is one of the thinnest and lightest 14-inch business Ultrabooks on the market. This is a hair thicker because the digitizer for the active pen and touch adds a little bit of thickness to the lid section. We're going to look at it now. So just like the X1 Carbon 7th generation we reviewed, which shares pretty much an identical chassis, to be honest, you got the same ports, you have the same CPU, RAM, and SSD options, we have improved stereo speakers. This time we have 4 speakers, so more volume, more room filling, actually quite good. It scared the daylights out of me when I first booted it up and Cortana started her, "Hi, welcome to Windows setup," kind of thing. That's good stuff there. A few things you might not be happy about though. To get it even thinner, they got rid of the lift and lock keyboard. So that's the thing where when you rotate it into tablet mode, the keys lock, so they don't jiggle and wiggle underneath your fingers. I never really cared so much about that. To me, the disconcerting thing was that you feel keys under your fingers when you're using this style of convertible with the Yoga hinges, and not so much that they moved a little bit. So if you really hate moving keys when you're using it in tablet mode, you're going to be unhappy. There's no micro SD card slot anymore. The same is true for the X1 Carbon. It lost that too in the effort to make it as thin and light as possible. Like the X1 Carbon 7th generation, the price is less scary than what we usually see at launch when, of course, the product is at its most expensive. Starts at about $1269 right now on Lenovo's website, and that's with a Core i5, a full HD low-power display, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 256 gig SSD, which isn't a bad configuration at all. If you want to go to town a little bit, it's something that we have with the Core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, a 512 gig SSD, and the 4K HDR display, yum yum, then you're looking at around $1,720. To bullet point out some of the upgrade costs, because you can build to order, about $182 to go from a Core i5 to a Core i7. If you want to go from 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, it's about $150, which is kind of expensive relative to today's RAM prices, but this is soldered on memory, so you don't have a choice. You can't do it yourself if you do want 16 gigs of RAM. And lastly, about $197 to go from the base Full HD low-power 400 nit display to the 4K HDR display. Speaking of those displays, just like the X1 Carbon 7th Gen, you have a lot of displays to choose from here, and this is kind of what sets the ThinkPad X1 Yoga apart from some of the competition in the business convertible laptop market, where often you're just stuck with some Full HD display of average kind of quality. So we have that Full HD low-power display, and that one's claimed to be close to 400 nits. It's 380. You'll notice if you also watched our Carbon review that we have the same displays with almost the same display rating, but they're about 20 to 30 nits lower on the Yoga, probably because of the digitizer that's put on there for the pen and the touch. You get the idea. So there's also a privacy screen option in Full HD resolution. There is a WQHD display, but it's not the HDR display from the last generation. Well, it's a nice 2K display, and that one is not super duper bright though. 280 nits claimed. And lastly, there's our 4K display. Now, Lenovo claims the 4K display is 470 nits. We only measured 400. Same thing with the X1 Carbon, and I tried to find all of the possible power settings and Intel graphics settings that might be dropping the display brightness on this, but still, hey, 400 nits on a nice HDR 4K display is actually good enough for me. Of course, it is a kind of glossy display, but reflections are really well controlled here. Rest of the metrics you can see on screen. It is a wide gamut display. Has pretty good contrast, not OLED level. This isn't an OLED display, but then the good thing is IPS displays don't generally use as much power as OLED displays. For hardware specs, it's the same thing again as the X1 Carbon. This is Intel 8th generation, late 8th generation Whiskey Lake quad-core 15-watt Ultrabook CPUs. And you can get it with a Core i5 or a Core i7, and then there are the vPro variations of that for those who need vPro. You can get up to 16 gigs of RAM, 8 or 16 are the 2 configuration options, and that's low-power DDR3, and it is soldered on board. You have one M.2 NVMe SSD slot. We have a fast 1 TB Samsung drive in ours, and you can go all the way up to 1 TB, or if you wish to upgrade it yourself later, you can if you really want to get a 2 TB drive, for example. Intel 9560 AC Wi-Fi with Bluetooth 5, a Microsoft Precision trackpad, the usual backlit, white backlit keyboards on board here, and the Think shutter, which is a little slider that is so subtly integrated above the webcam you might not even see it, but it's there. There's a fingerprint scanner, and there's an option for a Windows Hello IR camera. Performance is as you would expect for an Intel 8th generation 15-watt Ultrabook CPU with Intel UHD 620 integrated graphics, no dedicated graphics option on this very thin and very light machine. In fact, Lenovo actually allows the CPU to go up to 25 watts for short periods of time. It's thermally constrained and can't spend too much time there. In terms of heat and noise, the fan is pretty quiet. Most of the time doing productivity work, you won't hear it at all. The bottom being metal, you'll feel a little bit of heat towards the center rear area, typically between where your legs or knees would be if you had it resting on your lap. Nothing really to complain about there either. In terms of ports, again, like the X1 Carbon, same thing. 2 USB Type-A 3.1 ports, 2 USB-C Gen 2/Thunderbolt 3 ports, a little dongle, proprietary dongle adapter connector place for the Ethernet adapter if you wish to roll that way, or you can use a docking station connector that plugs into that Ethernet and Thunderbolt 3, second Thunderbolt 3 port. Of course, there's a headphone jack on board as well, and HDMI 1.4. So the keyboard, ThinkPads always have wonderful keyboards. Again, things are getting skinnier, so key travel is going down. But it's not bad news. It's 1.5 millimeters of key travel, which by today's thin Ultrabook standards is still not bad. It's obviously better than, say, something like the Dell XPS 13 that has 1.3 millimeters of key travel. It still feels very good. Springy, tactile, smile-shaped keys. You get the idea. It's really nice to type on, just not as deep as it used to be. And the precision trackpad is large, it's good, and we have the nav pointer for you ThinkPad traditionalists. So how about that pen? It's the usual Wacom AES digitizer that Lenovo has been using in ThinkPads for some time, and they say that this is 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity and the usual small ThinkPad pen that lives in the silo on the side of the laptop, which is always a good thing, though. With Dell Inspiron finding a way to put a full-size pen garage on a laptop, I'd love to see that coming next. If you do want a bigger pen, you can get the Lenovo ThinkPad Pro pen that we can show you right here. So that one is kind of normal size if you feel like holding a little rechargeable toothpick isn't the most comfortable thing for long writing sessions. It's not the best thing in the world for artists, but it's better than nothing. Certainly, it is only 2,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, not 4,000 like you'll see in some of today's laptops. It's not Wacom EMR. You get the idea, artists. You know what I'm talking about. The rest of you folks don't even worry about this. Jitter on this, it's got some diagonal line jitter, again, something that really matters to artists more than note takers. But overall, palm rejection on it's pretty good. The pressure curves are pretty nice on this. And for note taking, it's totally dreamy. For those of you who really are into Wacom EMR, of course, there are the Samsung Notebook 9 series, and they do have Wacom EMR pens. A little bit more of a consumer orientation, though, for the Samsung laptops, not as rigid and durable a build, that sort of thing, but there are pretty nice options as well. There's also, if you're into Dell, the Dell Latitude 7400 2-in-1, which actually has an even slightly smaller footprint, not thinner, but smaller footprint because they really went like no bezels on that one. With the Dell, even though they claim it's 2.99 pounds, it actually weighs heavier on our scale, and it feels a little bit heavier. Not quite a half a pound heavier, so a little bit heavier to carry around, but it does have an SD card slot, which is nice. When it comes to display options, though, the ThinkPad is going to win because they're with their WQHD 2K display and the 4K display. Latitude really is sitting there in full HD land. So we got good speakers, we got a pen, we got a lovely display, we got yogaing versatility, so what's not to love? Well, the battery capacity actually went down just a little bit. It's 51 watt-hour, which is a decent capacity for an Ultrabook. It really is going to depend on what display option you go with, though. Just like with the X1 Carbon, that 4K display does consume considerably more power than the full HD low-power display, which is one of the lower power consumption displays you're going to find on a laptop today. So while Lenovo claims 18 hours potentially on a charge, I don't know how you would ever manage that. But if you do go with that full HD low power display, I would say 10 hours probably easily enough, doable for everyday productivity use with brightness set to 150 nits, maybe a little streaming video thrown in. Our 4K display mirrors pretty much our X1 Carbon experience, which has the same battery. It's about 6.5 hours with brightness set to 150 nits, a mix of productivity, a little streaming video, a little bit of Photoshop time thrown in there. You do get the usual 65-watt fast charger that speeds up charging times. Getting inside is really easy. I take out the pen first from the garage. You might not have to, but hey, safe is better than sorry. And then you've got 5 visible Phillips head screws, again, identical to the X1 Carbon 7th generation, lifted up from this end because they're just clips here, and it's meant to be lifted from here. Ah, the sweet sound of metal in the morning. So there's the cover. And it looks just like the X1 Carbon, again, inside here, with lots of Mylar everywhere. Boy, they love that Mylar this time around. So here are our 2 down-firing stereo speakers. The Lenovo says the up-firing are more like tweeters, the down-firing ones are a little bit more like woofers. You get the idea. 51 watt-hour battery right here. And our CPU heatsink, our fan. This is the M.2 SSD, so that's upgradable. That's socketed right there. The other socket is for the optional 4G LTE WWAN card if you want to go with that, and that's a Fibocom card. Our Wi-Fi is soldered on right over here. You can see the antenna lead, so that one is not something that you can change after the fact. Happily, it's a good Intel 9560 AC card, so that should be good. And RAM is soldered on board, which is typical of many Ultrabooks. So that's the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga, 4th generation for 2019. And I've always been a fan of the X1 Yoga line because I really do like the pen, as you might guess, because I do artwork and I like note-taking and all that sort of thing. I do like that it's gotten thinner, you know, and the footprint has gotten smaller. Not that I think we have to have anorexic laptops out there, but it was a bit of a heavier carry than the X1 Carbon. It used to make me think, oh, that X1 Carbon looks so good. You don't have to feel that way anymore. And it's got its own look. It kind of sets the benchmark for a 14-inch business Ultrabook with a convertible design. They're really still doing good things here, even if we did lose the lift and lock keyboard and our micro SD card slot. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.